I'd like to welcome everyone to the Nashville Bar Association Judicial Town Hall with Judge Melissa Blackburn. Judge Blackburn presides over Division 2 of General Sessions Court, and she's the presiding judge of the Mental Health and Veterans Courts. And we are so happy to have her here today to talk to our members about changing court procedures and what's going on in her court in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Welcome, Judge Blackburn.
Thank you.
I'm going to start off by asking you just sort of generally to give us an overview of the changes in the procedures in your courtroom following the Supreme Court's unprecedented orders surrounding this pandemic.
Well, what we've done is we have not stopped Mental Health and Veterans Court. I know the courts that are going forward are those courts that are required by the Constitution, which are felony jail, misdemeanor jail, and DV jail. Those are going forward. But Judge Robinson, myself, and Judge Escobar decided that those treatment courts are very necessary in light of the pandemic, and we could not stop serving those communities that we serve. And we have continued to have those dockets. And my staff, in fact, is contacting each of the individuals on a daily basis that are part of the Mental Health and Veterans Court to check on those individuals and confirm that those individuals are still doing well and that they do not need any additional care or assistance. They are still being drug screened. They are still going to AVERTest and calling that AVERTest line every single day. And when we do have an individual that is testing positive, I do have a zero tolerance right now during this time since we are not on our regular court schedule. They are also, the only individuals I'm seeing in court are those individuals that are non-compliant. I am not having a regular Monday Veterans Court, Tuesday and Thursday Mental Health Court, and Friday morning jail docket. So when I do come in and have court, it is only for those individuals that are non-compliant. So while they're checking in with other individuals on a daily basis, actually everyone on a daily basis, I am beginning tomorrow, in fact, going to be doing dockets with groups that are in transitional housing. One of the homes we use is called Grandpa's house. Well, Trish is taking a laptop and I'm going to Zoom with all of my folks that are at one of Grandpa's homes. So we're going to chat with them for an hour, whoever's in that house, and I'm going to check in with them via Zoom and see how they're doing. Do they have any questions? Do they have any problems? While they're talking to their individual that takes their contact with the court on a daily basis, they're not don't have any issues. So I'm just going to check in with them, hello, still have that contact with them, but yet they're not having to leave that home where they're staying safe and where they're socially distancing. We're also making accommodations in the courthouse. We had our General Sessions annual retreat yesterday. Part of us participated via Zoom and part were in the courthouse. During that discussion, we have decided, and it's currently being done right now, the General Sessions courtrooms are being lined off so that there are seats that are marked that are 6 feet apart. So when you go back into the courtrooms, once we open back up all the courtrooms, you will notice that there are markings on those benches indicating to individuals where they can sit and where they cannot sit. So the next time that I do have Mental Health and Veterans Court, which will be on the 18th and 19th of May, there will be markings on those benches telling them where they can and cannot sit. Also, I believe we're expanding the number of people in the courtroom. Previously it was 10. It's going to soar to 12. But we're not going to expand it beyond 12, I believe, at that point. That was another thing we discussed yesterday. We discussed a number of ways in which, once we do open up, which we discussed will most likely be after June 1st, how we're going to open up slowly civil and criminal simultaneously, because the number of criminal warrants that are out there and civil warrants, we need to both try to free up at the same time and open those pipelines up gently, but open them up at the same time. All of that will be coming down with the orders from the Supreme Court, because we're required by judicial district, pursuant to Justice Bivens in the Supreme Court's last order. Each judicial district is required to submit an order to the court for their approval. Once they approve it, then that can go into effect, but they have to approve it by judicial district. So everyone is at this point trying to figure out how we best want to approach it. And that was something Judge Jones, as our presiding judge, presented ideas to us yesterday. We all discussed, made suggestions with the help of the sheriff, as General Funk, Morticia Johnson, and also the clerks were there present making their suggestions, Ricky Rooker, and also Mr. Gentry was present with Patty in his ear. By the way, Patty was giving him suggestions while he was sitting there with us. So all those people were collaborating with us, trying to come up with the best way to make suggestions and proposals that we felt would be the easiest way to open back up. So all that is ongoing at this time. Does that answer your questions, Laura?
It does. I have a few follow-up questions on the recovery courts. You mentioned checking in with all of the participants on a daily basis. Am I correct that that is more checking in than is typical of the recovery courts?
Yes. Previously, the individuals would, when they first start with either mental health or veterans court, they're seen by the court on a weekly basis. So they're seen by their client specialist and by the court on a weekly basis when they're in phase one of either program. Once they reach that 60 to 90 days where they're compliant, they're not testing positive, and they're able to move to phase two, then they're seen every other week, as long as they're compliant and they're not testing positive. So they're not seen weekly, they're seen every week, both by their client specialist and by the court. And that's as long as they're compliant. Then they move through that second phase to a third phase, which is then they're seen every 3 weeks or once a month, depending on how they're doing. And as long as they're compliant, they continue to move through those phases to graduation. But at any point they're not compliant, they start testing positive, they need to be moved either back down or into transitional housing if they were living on their own. That all increases. So normally to answer your question, they would not be being seen or spoken to on a daily basis. But because they're not being seen, they're not coming into the courthouse weekly, hence the need for the daily check-in. Plus, with people socially distancing, they may not be speaking to another individual. They also are not, normally individuals, part of their treatment plan can be 90 meetings in 90 days. Well, Alcoholics Anonymous or Al-Anon is not meeting now face-to-face. They're meeting by Zoom. So those individuals are not having the personal contact or the ability to check in with a sponsor or those support organizations. So what we're trying to do is everything possible to help the individuals that are going through those programs have the support they need around them to hopefully keep them from reoccurring.
And for the proceedings that you are still handling in your court right now under the emergency order, are those being handled by video or telephone?
The ones that we're handling in the courtroom are actually live in the courtroom, because the ones that are going on in the courtroom are for individuals that have tested positive, have picked up new charges, are currently incarcerated. So anyone that's coming into the courtroom is at risk of being taken into custody for one reason or another. So those are live proceedings, and counsel is present in the courtroom for those proceedings as well.
Are you handling any proceedings remotely right now?
we are handling M2MHI as General Sessions Court remotely. I know that Judge Bell handled 3A and 3C, which was the misdemeanor and felony jail dockets, remotely a couple of weeks ago, but no other proceedings, am I aware, are being held remotely. I'm not holding any mental health or veterans court remotely because the only individuals that are coming in are those that are subject to going into custody.
And you mentioned some of the measures that you're putting in place to ensure social distancing once you're starting to open back up more in court proceedings. But for those that are going on right now, what sorts of social distancing measures are you taking in your court?
Only 10 people are to be in the courtroom, and that includes the court officers, that includes the clerk, that includes the sheriff's deputy that's in the courtroom, the blue shirt that's in the courtroom, the public defender, and the DA. So that pretty much only allows 1 or 2 individuals in the courtroom at any given time, because you've also got the client specialist. So once you count all those individuals that are part of the court system that are present in that courtroom, it's basically 1 individual at a time coming in and coming out. So anyone else is sitting outside on those benches. I know the recommendation, I think, was made this week by Dr. Hildreth from Meharry that the benches in the hall be replaced by chairs because they would be better for social distancing. Because I believe when he did the walkthrough of the courthouse, more than the requisite number of people were sitting on a bench. Just naturally, they sat down on the bench. And that was a problem for him, that we needed to make the social distancing work. In order to do that, we needed to place chairs instead of benches in the corridors.
Are you requiring people entering the courtroom to wear masks or gloves? And do you anticipate requiring that when things start to open back up?
That was one of Dr. Hildreth's suggestions, that everyone entering the courthouse wear masks.
And will that be something that lawyers and litigants are supposed to supply themselves, or will the court be able to provide any of those supplies?
I know that Metro is seeking to provide those currently and is in the process of trying to. I know that process, I think, began earlier this week. Now, whether Metro will be able to locate a source for those, I don't know. I know when I was in court last Monday, the DA, all DAs had a mask on and all public defenders had a mask on, as well as all of my court officers. At that point, we were all supplying our own. Now, whether attorneys will naturally supply their own, which they seem to that day in court as well, I think everyone was taking it very seriously to protect themselves, understanding those were criminal dockets. So you were seeing someone that was in custody. So you were speaking to a client who was in custody and having to go back into the area that was behind doors. So you had a client that had been in the jail and had not been out. So you were at a higher risk going back and speaking to your client at that point also.
We've heard some of our judges talk about the decision of whether or not to install any kind of plexiglass barriers in their courtroom to allow for more social distancing. Do you have any plans for that in your courtroom?
Well, we were asked by Judge Jones what each of our positions were, and we each gave a response. Now, the plexiglass, as I understand it, would be between us and the witness and between us and our clerk. There would be no plexiglass in front of us. So it would be to protect us from a witness and from the clerk and any exposure coming from those 2 locations. I do not know what the end result of that question was. It was not discussed yesterday at our retreat.
Well, I guess this is kind of a 2-part question to focus both on what's currently happening and what's expected to happen. But will lawyers and other people appearing in your court have the option to appear by remote means if, for example, they're in a risk group or they just prefer not to participate in person?
I don't know the answer to that question because of a technology standpoint. Right now, there's only one courtroom in the courthouse, which is 4C, that has that capability. And currently, we're using that courtroom for mental health when we do it remotely, and we're in the courthouse. The attorneys are in other locations, or we're in other locations. And we were also using that courtroom when we were releasing people from jail at the request of the public defender and DA. And we were using that courtroom to connect to either CCA or the jail. And that courtroom was being used for that purpose. To my knowledge, there is no other courtroom that has that capability currently. And I don't know if we as General Sessions Court have the equipment to outfit any other courtroom.
I want to take a quick pause and just to remind those that are participating in this conference that if you have a question for Judge Blackburn, if you'll use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to submit the question across, and I'll be sure to ask her. Judge Blackburn, do you anticipate backlog on the dockets that you're not currently hearing proceedings in? And then do you have a plan for how you're going to work through that backlog?
As far as my mental health and veterans court dockets, yes, because I know that there are a number of people that are asking to be screened for the courts, and we are trying our best to do those screenings. And there are individuals that are currently not in custody that are requesting to be part of the mental health and veterans courts. And we're also trying to do those screenings as well. But with limited availability of space to do that, with the social distancing guidelines in place, we are doing our best to try to see those individuals, whether they're incarcerated or not, and conduct those screenings.
Are there any procedures that you've adopted since this pandemic became our reality that you anticipate becoming just part of the norm even after the risk subsides?
I don't know the answer to that yet. I think that's part of that quandary is, as part of this, we're moving from CCA and the current jail location to the new location. So that's in this whole mix. We're about to move all these prisoners over the next month and a half, whatever Sheriff Hall's time frame is, to move all those individuals to his new facility. And I've been over there. I've looked at the mental health portion of that facility, and I have no idea what the look is going to be once we move all those individuals from where they're currently housed into that new facility, and then how my staff is going to be able to go interview individuals to determine whether they're eligible for mental health and veterans court, what that interview process looks like once we're in that new facility. I know what that process looks like from the mental health care point. It's phenomenal. It's absolutely a gorgeous facility. But as far as the actual interview space in the regular jail component, I don't know yet what that looks like. And I think that's going to be something that's going to evolve, because that was built pre-COVID. Now we have COVID, and we've got to come up with new procedures to make sure we're socially distancing and everyone's safe in a building that was built pre-COVID. So I think we're going to have to work through that challenge. And the building is absolutely gorgeous. And I'm sure will be streamlined and it will be a very difficult procedure, but I don't know yet what that looks like.
One thing that many of our courts have had to embrace with this pandemic is the concept of e-filing. And I understand that our general sessions courts and criminal courts are accepting filings by email now. Do you anticipate there being some move to that being a more permanent situation in our courts?
I know that Mr. Rooker has already made that and is making that change more and more dramatically. We're already using that as far as everything that's done at MTMHI. There is no hard file any longer for any case at MTMHI. Everything is on the computer and on the screen when we get there. As far as us making the change to e-filing in the criminal court system, I know they're working very diligently to get that done, and that was mentioned yesterday. I don't know the date for that conversion, but I know that's something they're working on, and it's something I would look forward to, because that's the reason that we wear the gloves, is because of the thousands of pieces of paper we touch every single day that have been all over the courtroom and who knows where else by the time we touch them. So to be able to not have paper would make a huge difference in everyone's life and make us all so much safer if we could just look at it all on the computer screen.
What can lawyers be doing to help make matters move more efficiently in our courts during this time?
I guess communicate more with each other. That's one thing that I think would make a huge difference, because what I've seen and the conversations we've had with the DA, the conversations that were had yesterday, is when you all communicate with each other and with the DA, so many things are able to be resolved prior to coming into the courtroom, so that you don't have to bring a prisoner into that courthouse or a witness into that courthouse for a civil case. So many things can be resolved that cut down on the need to expose yourself, your client, or somebody else to COVID that doesn't have to cross that threshold. And I don't want you exposed to somebody that didn't need to come, a defendant that didn't need to come in for a civil case because somebody didn't return a phone call. Return a phone call, have somebody in your staff return that phone call. If you can get that collection case resolved, if you can get that, right now we're not serving detainers. I cannot fathom what's going to happen when they start opening that Pandora's box back up. All those individuals that are behind on their rent from February, March, April, now May, can you imagine what's going to happen with that? And all those people start pouring into the courthouse. How many people are there going to be in that group that may be COVID positive? And who all are they going to expose when they walk through that door? If attorneys or their staff return those phone calls and try to get those cases resolved before those thousands of people flood into that courthouse, who are exposing those blue shirts standing in there as security, or walking into the clerk's office to try to pay something, or you're in there handling it, you don't do criminal work, but an attorney going upstairs for criminal court, standing on that elevator with those folks, all of that exposes everybody that walks through that door. And if somebody can try to resolve even the smallest case so that a witness, your victim, doesn't have to walk in and be exposed, makes so much sense. I know we talked about it yesterday, and this was at the request of Mr. Rooker. When we finally open civil back up, we're not going to set anything for trial for the first 30 days. It's just going to be a date to come in and get a new date if you need to have it heard. Otherwise, it's going to be trying to get it settled so that we can try to keep all those witnesses out of that courthouse for the first 30 days. And if everyone, will just please pick up the phone, talk to opposing counsel, try to get things settled. If you need a trial, get a trial date, but don't come into that courthouse unless you have to and expose yourself, because we want to keep the cases, the COVID cases down.
You've referenced the judicial district coming up with a plan for how to reopen a couple of times, and it's my understanding that that's sort of in process right now. What can we anticipate seeing in that plan? And for example, is it going to be kind of a phased rollout like we've seen our cities or we've seen Metro proposing with respect to other operations in the city?
I would expect it would be. I don't know. I don't think any of us know, because it's going to involve the criminal courts. It's going to involve the historic courthouse. It's going to involve general sessions. and it's going to involve juvenile. And it all has to be in one package. It all has to be sent to the Supreme Court, and they have to agree to it. And that's for every single district across the state. It's all separate, and they have to review every single district's plan. So I know they're all working diligently. That was, as I said, what we talked about yesterday, to present our thoughts for general sessions reopening. But then historic courthouse is coming up with their plan. Juvenile is coming up with theirs, and it's got to be in one package to go. And we're all looking at how best to reopen in a safe manner, and how to protect you all as attorneys, how to protect our staffs, the witnesses, the victims. So I anticipate it will be a process, but can be stopped at any point if the cases go up, and we need to stop it to keep public safety.
Have there been any silver linings from your perspective, or is there anything in particular that you've been grateful for during this uncertain time?
I've been grateful for the dedication of my staff and the dedication of the bar. The Nashville bar came through when the tornado hit, when COVID-19 hit, and everyone has just hung in there. I haven't heard any complaints. I haven't heard any moaning. All I've heard is how we're going to get through this, and everybody working together and pulling together to figure out how to make it work. I haven't heard any moaning or complaining at the courthouse. I haven't heard any moaning or complaining about the crazy hours or when I've got to work next or what's going to happen. Everybody is just sticking in there and getting it done. And I think that's what's happened with attorneys. I mean, I know it's been crazy. I know nobody knows what's going to happen next. We each wish we knew, okay, May 15th, June 15th, it's all going to go away. But nobody knows. Even the health department doesn't know. I was reading something this morning, and I cannot pronounce his name correctly, so please excuse me. The new director of Metro Health Department, he keeps telling us to be patient. And no, we haven't leveled out yet. And yes, today I think we only had 24 new cases, I think. But yesterday we had 100. But we're all hanging in there. And yes, we want everything to open up. But everybody seems to be doing what they need to do and trying to get the job done and trying to serve their clients and trying at the same time to make sure the community is okay.
I concur with those sentiments. I think it's been wonderful to see how much our lawyers have worked together and our courts have worked together during this time to kind of band together and persevere.
Yes.
I want to give our participants one last opportunity to submit across questions, and I'll ask those of Judge Blackburn. And Judge Blackburn, I want to ask you, from your perspective, is there anything else that lawyers who are practicing in your courtroom need to know about procedures right now, or are there any best practices that they should be aware of?
Well, one thing I don't think a lot of people know about mental health and veterans court, and what's important is the opportunity that those two courts offer for individuals with criminal charges. It's a fresh start. Anyone that has a mental health need, that has a criminal charge, a charge in criminal court or general sessions court, because criminal judges also refer cases of individuals with mental health needs to mental health and veterans court. It is a fresh start. The judge can refer it, the DA can refer it, the attorney can refer it, even probation officers do. And what it does, it allows those individuals to have services wrapped around them. If it's a mental health need, it may be their first psychotic break and they didn't realize they had a mental health problem, but somebody around them realized they did. Well, we figure out a plan, how to address that mental health need, get them the mental health services they need, get them into stable housing, get them their mental health appointments, get them on medication, get them stable, and start putting their life back together and figure out how to address whatever they did as a result of that psychotic break. Whatever charges they picked up, whatever had happened in their past, we figure out how to put the pieces back together again. If it's a veteran, we do the same thing.
Have you seen an increase in the number of cases in the mental health court since this began? And maybe I could even take it back to since the tornado with all the uncertainty. I wonder whether that is causing an increase in needs of your court.
We haven't yet, but I expect as soon as we are able to open the courts back up and start actually having regular court, I expect we're going to see a dramatic difference, because I think we're going to see people with needs that we didn't see before and didn't realize were there. We have seen individuals reoffend that had been with the court several years ago and have come back to the court again. And that had increased somewhat right before COVID began. And that may have been a part of the tornado, because some of those individuals may have been living in a tornado affected area and lost their housing, their security, things that had kept them together, and those things disappeared. But we put all the resources around those individuals that they need. If it's a veteran, we get the VA involved. We get Operation Stand Down involved. We get Matthew 25. We get any support agency around them, get their veterans benefits turned on. And we bring all those agencies around them and get them the care and the support and the housing they need. And those things normally aren't in place for that veteran prior to them starting Veterans Court. Normally they've just kind of been drifting along and lost their way. And you need to put all those pieces back together and get all those services and those resources around them so that they can start over.
Have you seen an uptick in any other kinds of cases? I know with COVID-19 and even the tornado too, that people are having unusual financial strain. And I know that there have been orders about evictions and garnishments and that sort of thing. But is there any particular types of cases you're seeing more of now?
Well, we see a lot of young people that don't have resources that are ending up in the courts, where they've probably been struggling for a number of years, and their families have gotten to a point that they're no longer going to deal with them. These are young people that have probably for quite some time had a mental health need, but their family just kind of covered it up or didn't address it. And it finally got to the point where mom, dad, grandma, whoever was done, was absolutely done. And they're in jail. This isn't their first offense, probably their fifth or sixth, maybe their 10th. And mom or dad isn't going to let them come back home again. And we have to figure out housing. We have to figure out what mental health they need, where they need to go. That individual thinks, oh, they can go back to mom or dad's. No, they can't. Mom or dad has said no. Sometimes it involves domestic abuse against that parent or a grandparent. And we have to figure out where's a safe place. We have to figure out they normally don't have any source of income. And if they have a mental health need, we have to figure out how to get Social Security turned on. Because if they're not able to work, we have to find an income source, because they can't pay for a halfway house if they don't have any income source. And that usually takes 60 to 90 days to get SOAR benefits turned on. And you've got to figure out how can we house them until we get that benefit turned on. Sometimes it means they have to sit in jail for that 60 to 90 days until we can get income. And that's unfortunate. And there are no resources in Davidson County readily available for some of those young people. And it's so unfortunate they have to sit in jail until we have those resources. There is no funding in Davidson County for mental health services. The only source we have for funding in Davidson County is Metro. So we have to go ask to be included in the Metro budget every year for mental health services. The state does not provide any funding for mental health services, even though the governor says he puts that in his budget every year. He put $2.5 million last year in his budget, but he didn't put a dime in for Shelby, Davidson, or Hamilton County. All the money went to the outlying counties, which was so unfortunate. Yes, I'm sure they needed it, but we desperately needed some in Davidson and Hamilton and Shelby County. But we had to figure out how we were going to get funding for our courts and for the individuals in those courts that needed funding, whether it was for a halfway house, for medication, for treatment, for whatever those individuals needed funding for. We had to go figure out how to find those funds. So, which is a tough issue.
It is. One last topic I wanted to touch on before we come to the conclusion of our program is just the effort that we've seen in the General Sessions Court and other courts to release inmates and prisoners in our jails. And I wanted to kind of hear from you how that's being addressed in your courtroom or what your perspective is on that.
I have a very unique perspective. I did probably one of the last dockets. General Funk was present, so we're one of the PDs. I probably had 25 people on the docket. I ultimately, with General Funk's request and the public defender's request, released all but 2. The 2 I did not release were young men. They had DUIs that also involved drugs, not just alcohol, but drugs. And they both involved automobile accidents. One of them had been in mental health court, and I had known him for quite some time. He had had 3 probation violations during his time at mental health court. He never, ever remained off pot or marijuana the entire time he was in mental health court. He refused to stay clean. Ultimately, I had to put his sentence into effect. So he never once followed the rules of probation while he was in mental health court. And they were asking me to let him out. I refused. So for the entire time he was in mental health court, he never could follow the guidelines or the requirements of probation. I had absolutely no confidence whatsoever he was going to stay clean and sober if I let him out of jail. And I felt certain he would injure himself or kill himself and or an innocent citizen of Davidson County. So I declined to let him out. The other individual I had similar feelings about, and General Funk withdrew his request as he and I and the public defender discussed the other individual. One young lady, I did agree to let her out and suspend her sentence. She was told that she needed to return the next morning at 8 o'clock to the probation department to check in. She was going to serve the remainder of her sentence on probation. She did appear the next morning, probably about 9 o'clock. The head of probation came up into my courtroom and said, "Judge, I have an off-docket matter." I said, "What is it?" She told me her name and said she was downstairs in probation. High's a kite. She said, "She's not just high." She said, "She is out of her head. She's high as a kite." One of my court officers went down to check on her, had someone from mental health court go talk with her. She was beyond, totally gone. We took her into custody. We let her sit for 10 days, and then we reinstated her back, their sentence back into effect. No good deed goes unpunished. So I have mixed feelings, obviously, about it. I think 2 of the other folks we let out of jail that day have since been rearrested. So I understand the concerns. I think they're valid. I think when you have individuals that have health problems that do need to be let out so that they're not exposed, I think it's a very valid concern. I think we need to think more seriously about some of the ones that have substance abuse issues and have a long history, that probably that's not the best solution, but I understand the goal.
I know you're having to make very, very, very tough decisions during this time. And we so appreciate everything that you and our courts and our other judges are doing to help lawyers and people in our community who are in our court system adjust in these times. And we thank you for taking time today to share with our members.
I'm glad to do it. Thank you for asking me.
And we will now bring this town hall to a close. Thank you for everyone who participated, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.